Well, good morning. No church today. You may or may not have heard that I tested positive earlier this week for COVID 19. So we are staying away from each other for a while. We are planning on being back to church coming on next Sunday and get back to some of that. But for now, we are back to our remote learning. And so I just wanted to take a few moments to talk a little bit about what the main lectionary reading is today, and go from there. As for me, I'm doing okay. I've got I'm a little stuffed up, and it hasn't been too bad. I did on Thursday lose my sense of taste and smell, which is an odd sensation for sure. Um, it was weird because I was building a fire and I wanted to be outside for a little while, and I was building a fire and uh, noticed that the smoke was blowing right at me and I didn't smell anything. I thought, that's interesting. And then I went and had a cup of coffee and tasted like hot water. So I said to my mom, this is a wonderful opportunity to try those liver and onions that my brother talks so much about, I guess. So this would have been a great time for her to can those pickles too that I hated so much when she did. But yeah, well, it it otherwise I've been lucky. A lot of people have gotten it so much worse. Numbers are up again in Dawson County, and so I just urge you to be careful and wear a mask. And you know the biggest thing for me is you should wear the mask so you don't give it to somebody else. It's unfortunate that we live in such a divided time that we have people who I've heard people say that a mask was the sign of the devil or some democratic hoax or some goofiness like that. It's just helping people out. It's not going to keep you probably from getting COVID, but it could keep somebody else from getting it from you. And so I didn't do a very good job of wearing the mask before. To be very honest with you, I did it maybe more than others, but I didn't as much as I should. So I guess keep that in mind. This isn't just not a time to be divided, and I don't know. I certainly hurt for our country and the division that it seems like everything has caused. Everything, every single thing seems that we all want to go into our camps and be divided about something. And I don't know. It's rough. It's rough, and I wish that more people would turn to God to look to help people. But unfortunately, we I think spend too much time just trying to help ourselves and not thinking about others. And this is a perfect example of that. So that's my soliloquy to start this off with. But I wanted to get to our message today, and it's not far off from what we're talking about. We're not far off from what I'm mentioning right now. Our story comes from Exodus, and our lectionary is Exodus 16:2 through 15. You could also look at Psalm 78 to give you some background there. So we're kind of Old Testament stuff today, but we're talking about manna. And I'll just read you some of this, just so you have some background information. Again, this is Exodus 16, starting with verse 2. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the son of Israel said to them, would that we had died in the Lord's hands in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For we have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. And it will come about on the 6th day when they prepare that they bring it. It will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all of the sons of Israel, at evening, you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning, you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumblings against the Lord and what we are, and that you grumble against us. Just a little bit of it. There's more to it there. But it kind of goes along with what we've been talking about in the last few weeks about fear not. He said that he would give a day's portion, not any more, except for that one day that he was going to give double. It goes back to us saying that we're not supposed to worry. We're supposed to focus on this day. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, the Israelites really get hammered here. We like to beat up on them and say, ye of little faith and things like that. And but I think we ought to give them a little bit of a break. They had been wandering around in the desert for 6 weeks. There was no end in sight. In retrospect, when we look at 6 weeks compared to 40 years, it doesn't seem much, but they don't know it's going to be 40 years. There's no horizon there. They're hungry. They've eaten the same thing they brought with them, if they brought very much. We stop to think about it when we get hungry. This faith thing is supposed to be about satisfaction, right? And they weren't getting it. They weren't satisfied. And we do make fun of them. Some people say they're a bunch of losers. They could have, the divided the sea thing was pretty cool. The pillar of fire and the covering cloud must have been significant. Now we think of ourselves, we think surely we would have paid attention to those things. We would have remembered those things, and surely we would have trusted. Bottom line is, it's hard to be faithful when you're hungry. And so maybe we ought to listen again with a little more sympathy. I think we should do that for everything. I think we should listen with sympathy all the time. These people were hungry, and they weren't sure where their next meal was coming from. They didn't know where they were going. There was no thing on the horizon. They didn't have GPS or Google Maps itinerary to show them where the next thing was. At that point, stopping off at a Stuckey's somewhere would be nice. A Stuckey's. Do they still have Stuckey's? Buildings that still look like. But there was nothing on the horizon for them, and at least anything they could really see clearly. So they started to raise a bit of a ruckus. And then they did something that we like to do a lot. And they think back, well, gosh, when we were slaves, there was pots of meat over there. There was water for us. Maybe we were better off. That's one of the things that we like to do. We like to look back at the good old days, right? As Billy Joel said, the good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. We do tend to look back on things and forget about the other stuff. For so many years, I've heard people say, well, those were the good old days. Were they though? I mean, were they really when you looked at it? The things that you fought, the things that dealt with? Every time has difficulties. Luckily, God gave us a memory to remember the good things, and we don't dwell sometimes on the bad things, but certainly that was the case with these folks out of Egypt. They'd been slaves, they'd been beaten, they'd been whipped, but they thought, hey, that sounds better. At least I had something to eat. I think that most people that we would talk to that are in prison right now would say that just because you got 3 hots and a cot doesn't mean it's better. So Jesus God then gives them manna and gives them bread. But I think the overall picture here was, what is God doing in your wilderness? I'm not expecting to look up someday and see pita bread coming out of the sky. I think we're hungry. I do think we're hungry, even though we live in the most gluttonous society probably that there ever was. I think we're hungry for answers. You know, just maybe we are hungry for the right question. Psalmist doesn't ask us a question, gives us a challenge, but there is an inherent question there. What is the Lord doing among us? We're invited to give thanks to the Lord as we know how to do that. Our worship is often built around thanksgiving to God, but when the invitation goes on to say, make known God's deeds among the people, we often stumble. The usual question we ask is, how do we do that? How do we tell the people around us the deeds and what they are? What are God's deeds? Notice it's the people around us, not ourselves. We're supposed to be letting people who don't yet know God know what God is doing, so it is logical that the question would be a how one. How do we do that? What if that's the wrong question, or at least the wrong time to ask the question? We can't ask the how question until we have an answer for the what question. What is God doing among us? Okay, deeds can be historical. We can go and read the Bible to people around us. See, we can say. Aren't you impressed? Maybe some will be. But most will follow up with the usual societal question is, but what has God done lately? That's what people want to know. The real question that manna gives us in the desert compels us to answer, what is it that God has done right here in this particular part of our wilderness at this particular time in our wandering? Yeah, we need to pay attention to what God's done in the past. But it's good for us to review what God is, what he's done, but the primary reason, however, is that we must recognize God's actions among us today. What is it that God is doing right now with you, in you? These are the questions that will sustain us in the journey through the wilderness and give us something worth proclaiming to the people around us. God's manna manifests itself all the time. We have to be cognizant of that. We have to see that. And sometimes it helps us, I think, to focus on that, to focus on what those things are. And that's not always easy, but it's a good study for us. Amen. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time here today. I hope you're doing well and you're being safe. I urge you, as we continue to move forward, that you continue to seek what God is doing in our lives, to not grumble, to not complain about others and what others might be doing or thinking, but focus on God, focus on your relationship with him. And I think that will work to make it better. And with our lesson today, focus on seeing, I guess is the right word, but noticing what God is doing in your life right now. So I'm going to go have some liver and onions, I guess, and we'll talk to you soon.